Okay, let's face it. You know who hasn't wished for a sudden magical life transformation? One day, bam, we're couch potatoes. And the next, marathon runners. Fluent in Italian, churning out best-selling novels. But let's get real. Today we're diving into Atomic Habits by James Clear, exploring a, well, let's just say, more practical and thankfully achievable approach to lasting change. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Can we really uncover game-changing insights from just a 5-minute summary?
Absolutely. Even a quick glance at this material, you can find some seriously powerful ideas.
I'm all ears, especially about this idea of tiny 1% improvements, adding up over time. It's like the power of compound interest, but they're for our habits. But honestly, a part of me still wonders, is this really how it works? Can small changes really lead to big results?
It might seem counterintuitive. I mean, we're always bombarded with messages about quick fixes, overnight success. But think about how real lasting change happens. Learning a language, mastering a skill, even building a business. It's all about consistency, over intensity.
So instead of aiming for a drastic overhaul, we should be focusing on, like, the smallest possible steps.
Exactly. And that's where the concept of atomic habits comes in. It's about breaking down those big, daunting goals into tiny, manageable actions. Remember that example from the source. Starting with just one push-up a day.
Okay, one push-up, I can handle that.
Yeah.
But why? Why is starting so small so crucial?
Well, because it's all about overcoming inertia. That initial resistance to change, that's often what trips us up. So by starting small, we're essentially tricking our brains into thinking, hey, this isn't so bad, I can do this.
Yeah.
And once we overcome that initial hurdle, well, it's much easier to build momentum.
I see. It's like we're outsmarting our own resistance.
Precisely. And as we build consistency with those small actions, well, they begin to compound, just like interest in a savings account. It's a powerful reminder that lasting change, it isn't about grand gestures, it's about those consistent daily actions. As James Clear so aptly puts it, success is the product of daily habits, not once-in-a-lifetime transformations.
I love that. So it's not about finding like superhuman willpower or motivation. It's
Mhm.
about building systems for success.
Yeah.
And speaking of systems, the source talks about this really interesting concept of identity-based habits. This one I'm a little skeptical about, to be honest. Is it really possible to just like, fake it till you make it and change our entire identity?
Well, I can see why you might be skeptical, but there's actually a lot of psychological weight behind this. It's not just about pretending. It's about understanding the feedback loop between our actions and our beliefs.
So every action we take sends a message to our brains about who we are.
Exactly. If you consistently act like a healthy person, eventually your brain starts to believe it. And once that belief takes hold, it becomes easier to make choices that align with that identity.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like the more we embody a certain identity, the more naturally those habits will follow.
Precisely. The source material, it gives the examples of affirming, I am a reader, or I'm a non-smoker. Think about it. If you truly believed those statements about yourself, how would your actions, even your thoughts, change?
That's a really powerful question to consider. But if our actions shape our identity and our identity shapes our actions, where does it all begin? How do we actually kickstart this positive cycle?
Well, that's where the habit loop comes in. One of our most fascinating and practical takeaways from this material, it breaks down habit formation into 4 distinct stages: cue, craving, response, and reward. Think of it like a recipe.
Oh, I like where this is going. So the cue, that's like the ingredient list, setting the stage for the habit.
Exactly. It's the trigger that initiates the behavior. For example, let's say you're trying to build a habit of reading before bed.
Oh, I'm always trying to read more, so this is perfect. What would the cue be in this case?
Well, the source suggests placing a book on your pillow as a visual reminder. It's simple, but effective.
Makes sense. But a book on my pillow might just blend in with my usual clutter.
Well, the next step, craving, is where it gets really interesting. It's the motivational force behind the habit, the desire or need that the habit fulfills.
So in the reading example, the craving might be the desire to unwind, escape into a good story, or simply learn something new before sleep.
You got it. And that craving, well, that fuels the third stage, the response, which is the actual habit itself, picking up the book
Yeah.
and reading.
Okay, so we have the cue triggering the craving driving the response. What's the final ingredient in this habit
It's
recipe?
a reward. This is the payoff, the positive reinforcement that strengthens the habit loop.
So in the case of reading, the reward could be the enjoyment of the story, The feeling of relaxation
Mm.
or the satisfaction of gaining knowledge.
Exactly. And this is where things can get a bit tricky because if the reward isn't meaningful or satisfying enough, well, the habit is less likely to stick.
It's like we have to make sure the payoff is worth the effort.
Right.
We have to really want that cookie at the end of the workout.
That's a great analogy. We need to find ways to make those rewards truly appealing and aligned with our values and goals. And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of habit formation, the role of friction.
Friction. I'm usually trying to reduce friction in my life. Isn't that a good thing?
Well, it depends. When it comes to good habits, we want to make them as frictionless as possible. But for those pesky bad habits, friction is our best friend. It's about making those undesirable behaviors harder to perform.
So it's like setting up an obstacle course for bad habits
Yeah.
and paving a smooth path for the good ones.
Exactly. Remember those practical tips from the source? Like keeping a water bottle on your desk to encourage hydration or laying out your gym clothes the night before? Those are all about reducing friction for good habits.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about those digital habits that can be so hard to break? The endless scrolling, the notification checking, the constant distraction. How do we add friction to those?
That's a great question, and one that's incredibly relevant these days. The same principles apply, but we need to get creative with our strategies. For example, putting your phone in another room when you're working, or using app timers to limit your usage.
I've tried that, and it's amazing how much more focused I am when my phone isn't within reach. But let's be honest. Even with the best intentions, we're all going to slip up sometimes. We're human after all. That's where the never miss twice rule comes in, right?
Absolutely. This is one of the most empowering concepts from the source
Yeah.
because it takes the pressure off perfection. It acknowledges that slip-ups are inevitable, but it's how we respond that matters.
So it's not about beating ourselves up over a missed workout
Yeah.
or a late night social media binge.
Exactly. It's about understanding that a single misstep doesn't derail our progress. What we need to avoid is that second miss, the one that starts to form a new, undesirable pattern. As the source so brilliantly puts it, missing once is an accident. Missing twice is the start of a new habit.
That's such a powerful reframe. It's about interrupting the negative pattern before it takes hold. Okay, so we've talked about starting small, shifting our identity, mastering the habit loop, and even using friction to our advantage. But I'm curious, what about the bigger picture? How do we connect these individual habits to our overall goals and values?
That's where the concept of systems comes in. One of the key insights from the source is that we often overemphasize goals and underestimate the power of systems.
So it's not enough to just have a destination in mind. We need a roadmap to get there.
Precisely. Goals are the results we want to achieve, while systems are the processes that guide us there. For example, your goal might be to run a marathon, but your system, that's the consistent training schedule, the healthy eating habits, and the recovery routines that support that goal.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's about focusing on the daily actions, the small wins, that over time add up to those big achievements.
Exactly. And what's so powerful about systems? Well, they're less reliant on motivation, which, as we all know, can fluctuate. Once you have a system in place, it becomes more automatic, like a default setting.
That's brilliant. It takes the decision-making out of the equation. So on those days when I'm feeling less than motivated, my system is there to guide me, to keep me moving forward.
You got it. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The source highlights that many high achievers, they aren't necessarily more disciplined or motivated than the rest of us. They've just mastered the art of building effective systems.
So it's not about having some superhuman willpower. It's about creating a structure that supports our success.
I love that. Okay, I'm ready to start building some systems, but where do I begin? How do I take all these amazing concepts and turn them into, actionable steps?
Well, one incredibly effective technique is habit stacking. It's a simple but powerful way to leverage existing habits to build new ones.
Habit stacking. Tell me more. It sounds like something I could definitely benefit from. Well, the idea is to link a new habit to an existing one. For example, let's say you want to start a gratitude practice.
That's a great example. I've been meaning to do that for ages, but I always seem to forget.
Well, instead of trying to create a whole new routine, think about an existing habit that you already do. Without thinking, let's say you always make a cup of coffee first thing in the morning.
Oh, I can't function without my morning coffee.
Perfect. So you could stack your gratitude practice onto that existing habit. The formula is simple. After current habit, I will new habit. So in this case, it would be After I make my morning coffee, I will write down 3 things I'm grateful for.
That's so simple, yet so brilliant.
Hmm.
I'm already doing the coffee part anyway, so why not add a little gratitude boost while I'm at it?
Exactly. It's about using those ingrained neural pathways to make new habits easier to adopt. And the beauty is you can stack habits for all sorts of things. After I brush my teeth, I'll do a quick meditation. After I finish dinner, I'll go for a walk. The possibilities are endless.
This is seriously game-changing. I'm already thinking of all the habits I can stack. But even with stacking, sometimes those new habits they just don't seem to stick. Is there anything else we can do to set ourselves up for success?
Absolutely. One crucial factor that's often overlooked is the role of our environment. Remember, we tend to overestimate the power of motivation and underestimate the influence of our
So
surroundings.
even if we have the best intentions, if our environment is working against us, it's going to be an uphill battle.
Exactly. We're constantly bombarded with cues that trigger bad habits, from tempting snacks in the pantry to notifications on our phones. The more we can optimize our environment to support our desired habits, the less we have to rely on willpower alone.
So it's not just about what we do, but also about, like, where we do it.
Precisely. Think of it this way. You wouldn't try to write a novel in a noisy, chaotic coffee shop, would you?
Definitely not. I need peace and quiet to focus.
Exactly. And the same principle applies to other habits. If you're trying to eat healthier, having a bowl of fruit on the counter and keeping those tempting snacks out of sight can make a big difference.
It's like those behavioral economics nudges, but for our everyday lives.
You got it. And the source material, well, it encourages us to become architects of our environment, not victims of it. It's about taking control
Hmm.
and designing our surroundings to make it easier to live the life we want.
I love that. It's so empowering. So what are like some practical ways we can redesign our environment to support our habits?
Well, it doesn't have to be anything drastic. Even small changes can have a big impact. For example, keeping your workout clothes in a visible spot, placing your phone in a drawer when you need to focus, or even unsubscribing from those tempting email newsletters.
It's all about reducing friction for good habits and increasing friction for bad ones, right?
Precisely. And speaking of friction, there's another fascinating technique from the source that I want to share with you. Temptation bundling.
Temptation bundling. Now that sounds dangerous, but I'm intrigued.
It's actually quite brilliant. The idea is to pair something you want to do with something you need to do.
So like letting myself watch my favorite show only while I'm folding laundry or listening to a podcast while I'm on the treadmill.
Exactly. It's about adding a little bit of fun or enjoyment to those tasks that might otherwise feel like a chore.
I love that. It's like giving ourselves permission to indulge, but with a productive twist.
You got it. And by linking these activities together, you're more likely to follow through on both.
This is seriously blowing my mind. I never thought about habit formation in such a strategic way, but I'm curious, how do we know if all this effort is actually paying off? How do we track our progress and stay motivated?
That's a great question, and one that the source addresses directly. The power of accountability is essential when it comes to habit formation.
Because without some way of measuring our progress, it's easy to lose sight of how far we've come.
Exactly. And it's not just about celebrating our wins, although that's certainly important. It's also about identifying areas where we might be slipping up and making adjustments as needed.
So it's like having a feedback loop for our habits.
Precisely. And the source emphasizes that tracking doesn't have to be complicated. It could be as simple as marking a calendar each day you complete a habit, using a habit tracking app, or even keeping a journal.
I love that because it takes the guesswork out of it. We can literally see our progress, which can be incredibly motivating.
Exactly. And it also helps to raise our awareness of our patterns and triggers. By paying attention to when we succeed and when we struggle, we can start to identify the factors that influence our behavior.
So for example, if I'm trying to cut back on sugar and I notice that I tend to crave sweets in the afternoon, well, I could implement a strategy to address that specific time and trigger, like having a healthy snack on hand or going for a walk.
Exactly. It allows you to be more strategic and proactive in your habit formation.
Wow, this is all so insightful. I'm starting to feel like I have a whole toolkit of strategies for building better habits and breaking bad ones.
And that's the power of understanding the science of habit formation. It takes the mystery out of it and gives us a framework for creating lasting change.
This has been such an incredible journey so far. But before we wrap up, there's one last concept from the source that I want to touch on. The importance of having a belief system that supports our habits.
Ah, yes, the power of mindset. This is often overlooked, but it's absolutely crucial.
Yeah, because if you don't truly believe that you can change, it's going to be much harder to stick with new habits, right?
Exactly. Our beliefs shape our actions, and our actions reinforce our beliefs. So if we want to create lasting change, we need to cultivate a belief system that supports our goals.
So how do we actually go about building that belief in ourselves, especially when we've struggled with certain habits in the past? How do we overcome those like self-doubts?
Well, one powerful approach is to surround ourselves with people who believe in us and our ability to change. Having a supportive community can make all the difference.
That's so true. I know from personal experience how much easier it is to stick to healthy habits. When I'm surrounded by people who are doing the same, it's like we're all lifting each other up.
Exactly. It's incredible how much our environment and the people we spend time with can influence our beliefs and behaviors. And speaking of influence, another powerful strategy is to focus on our past successes, even the small ones.
I love that. Celebrating those wins, no matter how small, it helps to build our confidence and reinforce the belief that we are capable of change.
It's like we're gathering evidence for our own success. And as we accumulate more evidence, our belief in ourselves grows stronger, making it easier to stick with our habits, even when things get tough.
It's like we're rewiring our brains for success, one small win at a time. I'm feeling so inspired to put all of this into practice, and I have a feeling our listeners are too.
I hope so. Remember, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. What small step will you take today to start building a better habit or breaking a bad one?
That's a fantastic question for our listeners to ponder. We've uncovered a treasure trove of insights in this deep dive into atomic habits, and I hope it sparked a sense of curiosity and possibility for everyone tuning in. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.